Hello friends, foes, other watchers on the internet. My name is Matt. You're watching Hogwatch Gaming, and I'm here with Joe. And it's DM Talk.
Episode 3.
3, indeed. And today we're just going to have more of a discussion than a how-to kind of thing. But by listening to us, we hope that we'll help you with your DMing. So.
Yeah, or just listen to some dudes talk about Dungeons and Dragons for a while, because it's fun.
Yeah.
But we are still paying attention to the comments and watching for interesting things to discuss. This particular episode, we're gonna talk about we were talking about dungeons specifically, right?
Right.
We're gonna talk about how what's your approach to making a dungeon from scratch? Mm-hmm. What's my approach? Things that we do, things that we can talk to each other about.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have any announcements?
We're still interested in hearing from potential free sponsors.
There's probably a better word than
free sponsors. That sounds like an oxymoron.
It sounds like we're asking for something
for free,
nothing in return. We're asking for somebody to, if anybody is interested in us recommending their product, they would not have to pay us to do so. We would just ask that they share the episode in which we spoke of their product.
Right. Pretty easy.
Yeah.
So
everybody wins.
Yeah, and I think those are all of the announcements.
Yeah, because we're not really doing a follow-up this time.
Right.
So we're not ignoring comments.
Right.
We're just today different topic.
Exactly. So what is your approach to dungeon building?
So I go first?
Yeah, why not?
Well, to be totally honest, I use the randomizer in the book.
This might be a short episode.
Just kidding. I use it as, also it's not this book, it's this book.
Yep.
But I actually have found that to be a very effective one if I don't really have an idea. These are really great for generating ideas.
Yeah.
If I have an idea of I want a dungeon that's actually in a old factory of something where they made poisonous blades, or they made I don't know, rope, whatever, or this is in a cave, or this is in a dungeon, or this is in a crypt or something. But sometimes I have found it actually very fun to just sit down with a grid sheet, grid paper, and take the randomizer in the guide here, and just start generating the map and generating. You can roll for the purpose of the room, and as I go along, sometimes I will ignore a generation because it would be like, this room would make no sense with the size and shape having this purpose, so I just roll again and be like, oh, okay, that's interesting, and go from there. And then a story starts to develop in my mind of oh, this is why, maybe this is how, this is how this dungeon came to be. This is how this room's purpose came to be. This is why this treasure is hidden here, or this enemy resides here, or the story kind of develops from that randomization chart.
Right.
That's a way that I'm very fond of.
Yep.
And that's don't worry, the episode is going to be longer than that, because that's how I generate a dungeon. But we can get into some details for that. But for you, how do you start? How do you say okay, here's my overview? I randomly generate the main map and most of the details. How do you you want a dungeon, you don't have a dungeon, how do you get a dungeon?
My method typically depends on where this dungeon is and what this dungeon is. I usually try to establish that first.
So whereas I randomly generate a dungeon until I get an idea, you prefer to start with the idea?
Sometimes. Sometimes I just feel like I'm going to make a dungeon today, and I do exactly what you do.
But more often you would prefer... I actually thought you would prefer to start with the idea.
Right, yeah. I have a map that I've been working on. I'll put it up here. It's a pirate ship. And so how I started it is I had the main deck, and then I drew basically the same shape but a little smaller for below deck. And then, just for fun, I also drew masts and I forget what sails hang on, but you know, the rigging for the ship, so there could be combat up in the rigging if they wanted. And so I have the different layers of the ship. And then I have done some research on how ships are laid out, because like this last fall we went to Mystic Seaport in Massachusetts? I think that's where it is. And we went on whaling ships, and we walked through the underside of whaling ships and saw what it was like under the deck and stuff. So I was able to take that idea and kind of just draw a little map of the ship and then lay out like how that ship would work. But you know, so for like a cathedral like the Chapel of St. Bastian, you know, I had the sanctuary, and then I had the bell tower, and then I had the hospitality wing, and underneath that was the kitchen, and then the tombs and the crypt and whatnot. And so, using my knowledge of places I've been that are like what I want to put in my world, that kind of gives me a good idea of how to generate a map that looks like that.
So what is something like? How do you get inspired, I guess, for a dungeon? Like what makes you like what gets you creative and start thinking, oh, I could make a church, and the church could be a dungeon, or I could make a pirate ship. Like how do you get ideas? How do you get ideas for dungeons?
How do I get ideas for dungeons? Well,
I already told you, I don't. I just roll.
Well, before I answer your question, I really like the manner where is it a blade in your homebrew campaign with the phoenixes on the roof? Not the phoenixes, the
ice phoenix.
Ice phoenix, yeah.
Which is something I had to make up, but yeah.
Right. I really liked how that was a manor that we had to go to, and it was like an old, not thematically, but setup-wise, it was kind of like a Dracula castle kind of thing. It wasn't a huge fortress, it was just this manor house with
layers.
With layers
stories
and
stuff.
And different rooms and different traps in the room.
Yeah.
So, I think where I get ideas for dungeons is kind of dependent on where my players end up. And once again, this is another video.
Are you saying you kind of make a dungeon to match the campaign?
Yeah. Yeah.
So like they're going to a desert, pyramid,
right,
or something,
or a ghost town, or a gold mine, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I like to come up with an idea for the campaign, and then figure out where the dungeon in that campaign would be. Like for the
we could touch a little bit on ideas for campaigns too.
Okay.
You're right. We had discussed that, and that probably is a topic that could be covered over multiple episodes. But there's nothing wrong with saying like where do you get an idea for a campaign too.
Right.
Since that seeds your ideas for dungeons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like
I roll for that too. I have no ideas.
He does. He just.
I'm seriously though. Like I actually roll from the campaign that I've told you a little bit about the campaign that I was working on. I'd like to do it after Heart of the Dragon Queen.
Right.
To be finished. I actually rolled up a number of dungeons and then kind of built a campaign around that.
Well, that's awesome.
Here's this. Because I didn't want to just sit there and think like, okay, idea. Because as we've discussed in a past episode, I love the mechanics of Dungeons and Dragons, and I love how you can randomize.
Yeah.
Pretty much everything in the game could be determined by the roll of a dice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, I like doing that even to determine like what's the story going to be.
And I really have enjoying doing that while designing characters, like rolling through the background traits.
Yeah.
And just being like, I have no control over what this character is going to be. I'm just going to roll, and wow, this is a very interesting character.
Yeah.
And sometimes I tweak it a little. But
yeah, sometimes it doesn't make sense when you get like
right.
a dwarf cleric whose background is
charlatan.
Or a
that would
bard.
be a cool character, but still, yeah.
You could go with it. There's really no background that can't be used, but it just would be odd if you have like a charlatan or criminal background and yet you're a paladin who's not an oathbreaker, or
right.
What?
And
you can make anything.
Yeah, you can make anything work, but a lot of it, once again, relies on the campaign too.
Yeah.
Is like if you're an elf and your background is an urchin, but in this campaign world, elves are like the aristocrats, and
then you stand out.
You'd stand out as an urchin kind of thing. So you could take that urchin and just be like a rebellious soul or something like that. We're getting off track.
We are. Let's try to keep it around dungeons, but yeah. But dungeons. Like.
But as far as like the campaign goes, what I like to do is I like to think, okay, what haven't I done? And that's why I've enjoyed working on the Christmas one that I was working on.
Try something new.
Is try something new, throwing in like, okay, I've never done anything that was stylistically Christmassy, and is like Arctic based. For one thing, and so one of the suggestions I got when I asked people to help me out was, what if one of the places you go is a coal mine? There's my dungeon. Because Santa would have to get his coal somewhere.
Took me a second.
Yeah, it took me a second too, and I was like, wait, that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
And so I'm...
I feel like we're off center.
A little, maybe. I don't know.
Sorry.
But
coal mine.
But there's a dungeon I can make, and I don't have to make the whole tundra a dungeon, because it wouldn't be a dungeon. It's the wilderness, and I'm still trying to iron out how travel through that kind of wilderness would be fun to do. I have some ideas, but
all right. So you got an idea. We're like, I'm not going to ask you about the Arctic one, since that's an actual campaign that I'm hoping I'm going to play.
Okay.
So, if I could just throw my name into the ring. So let's take one that you haven't done. You're in the desert, ghost town. You have an idea for a dungeon. What do you do next? And then please ask me.
Okay, I will. Okay, so let's go desert, ghost town. Here's where the dungeon is in the ghost town. The well. The reason why the town was abandoned is the well was poisoned. When you travel down into the well, there's actually a cave of goblins that are living in that.
I thought you said you didn't make this dungeon.
I didn't.
Oh, you're just making it up now?
I'm just making it up
now. Oh, alright. So we get to see your method in action.
Right.
Alright.
So the first thing I would do is I would say, alright, this is the room that the well goes down into. Then I would branch off and say, so what rooms would be next to that one? Would there be like a poison supply? Would there be spoils there? Would there be a guard there? Like a guardhouse kind of thing, or a gate? In case the goblins were afraid that retribution would come down? And even if they're there, are they still in use? Because this is a ghost town. This isn't a currently habitated place. So would they have the gate closed?
This is totally different than my approach.
Well, good, because I want to hear yours.
Otherwise the discussion would be boring. Yeah, that's what I do too.
Oh, yeah.
Goodbye.
But then I go deeper into the lair, and I think, okay, so...
Well, just to clarify, don't tell me how this dungeon works.
Right.
For what? Because it sounds interesting, so don't spoil it.
Right, well...
But, like, the question would be, what's your approach to making the dungeon? It sounds like you progressively go through the dungeon in your mind. And
I do.
Like, well,
yeah.
So you actually, like, walk through the dungeon in your mind and then write down...
Right.
That's very interesting.
Right. I like to come... And sometimes I just am like, I want this dungeon to have this feature. Like, I just come up with, like, what would be cool
somewhere I want to plug this in.
Right, exactly. Like, sometimes when I'm rolling, I start with, like, I want a huge room that's 80 by 80 with a huge statue coming up in the middle, and on top of the statue would be like a throne or something like that. That's what I want these characters to come to. And then
so different.
I would put doors in where I want the characters to come in. And maybe I would put balconies on, so there would be 2 layers. And so you would stand on the balcony and you could look down into where people come out and stuff like that. You know, I create an awesome room, and then I build by rolling or just thinking, okay, so what are the functions of these rooms? What would be surrounding this room? And just kind of play with it. Taking ideas from places I've been, places I've studied. Cathedrals are very functional.
I like that you build it as you go.
Yeah.
Like it forms as you mentally walk your way through it.
Mm-hmm.
That's an interesting approach. I would get lost doing that.
Well, yeah, that is a hazard. That's why I have to draw as I'm making it up. Because if I
no, I mean, I guess that was a poor choice of words. I would get lost. Like I would. If I was to do that, it would end up being a completely linear dungeon. And I know that it doesn't happen with you because I've played your dungeons.
Right.
But mine would be like totally linear. You go here and here and here and here, and then there's this big old room here.
Mm-hmm. And that's legit.
That is one way to do it. But
right.
Your dungeons are not linear. There are different ways of going places, and you can come into that final room or these other goals. People can play your dungeons and experience it in completely different orders each time because it's not linear.
Right.
So how is it that you tie everything in to not be a snake room dungeon?
Well, a lot of it is, and this is kind of abstract, but imagining the flow of everyday usage of this dungeon.
This is Dungeons and Dragons. Everything is abstract.
Right, right. But
imagining the use of
the place you're designing. So you would have a kitchen, and then a dining room, but you would also have a place where the food was delivered, and then you would have the quarters where the people who create the food live, and then you would have the quarters where the people who don't have anything to do with the servants live.
Presumably this is still not at the bottom of a well.
Right. Well, I mean, maybe...
Kitchen. How do you access the kitchen? Through the well.
Exactly. But, like, for these goblins, you would have the feasting pile, where they throw all their meat that they've cooked, and they all just sit around and just grab food and eat out of it. And then you would have, like, near that, but not right next to it, you would have the holding pens for all the creatures that they kill. And then you'd have the killing room, and then you'd have the room with the pile. So then you're not like, okay, because it's like you don't go to the farm to go get your meal. You go to the grocery store to get the food for the... You see what I mean?
I'm looking for your pattern.
Right.
And what I'm seeing is you find interesting details and start arranging the details to form a larger dungeon.
Right.
That is the exact reverse of what I do.
Perfect.
Would you like to hear what I do?
Yes, please.
So one of the reasons is this the pattern that whoever is talking has to lean forward?
No. This is me getting comfortable, getting ready to listen.
All right. One of the reasons that I roll to generate the rooms and such is because it gives me a sandbox.
Right.
So I will either do that, or sometimes I'll go in Photoshop and just start randomly scrubbing out like a cave shape and different tunnels and big rooms there, and be like, okay, there's a room, or there's a dungeon. Just spaces and blocks to work in. A box.
Yep.
You build the box as you go. I'm like, I must have a box in which to work in. So I start with this empty dungeon.
Right.
And then decide, this room is going to have a vampire. this room is going to have zombies.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, now we're getting some sort of an undead feel here.
Right.
But why is it undead? It's a burial chamber. Okay, this is actually based on one of the roles. Let me see if I can change it. This starting all over. Like, let's see. This room that I randomly made is larger than the rest. There must be something interesting in here. What could it be? There's a fountain. I don't know why. Maybe the fountain is magic. Sure, let's make the fountain magic. How about let's make the fountain have a water elemental come out of it at some point. Mm-hmm. That would be interesting. That's probably enough for that room. Moving on. But even that is more finding the details than I usually do.
Mm-hmm.
To be honest, what I usually do is I have the map of the dungeon, just randomly generated, just in my own mind or rolled for or whatever. But I've got a sandbox, and then I start. I can't remember if this is in the guide or not, but I actually roll to determine if that room has a encounter or not.
Mm-hmm. And
if it does, then I roll to determine how difficult that encounter is.
Right.
And I think I took a D4 and rolled and limited. So if I rolled all fours, it wasn't just a deadly encounter in every room. But I figured you can figure out whatever you want, but I figured out some method of randomly determining, like, okay, this one is going to have an encounter, this is going to have an encounter, and it may be like, okay, this is a deadly encounter. That doesn't mean that they have to fight to the death, but this would mean like there is a threat in here that could kill them. But it doesn't mean that they very likely will die.
Right.
There is a force. But I don't know what they are yet. I just know, like, this is a challenge deadly here, this is a challenge mild here, this is a challenge moderate here, whatever. And I mark those all with 1 through 4. So now I know, like, a little bit more of the sandbox.
Right.
I don't find the details until the end. So I'm like, sandbox, how difficult is it going to be? And then I start saying, like, alright, what would be something fun here? Well, this room looks weirdly shaped. What if we did this and that? Let's see, we've got a water elemental here, and then over here we put a key. There's a locked key. Okay, well now there's a key, so there has to be a door to unlock. Do this, but I work in the shapes that I already made.
Right.
So I actually don't start. I might start with an idea like I want it to be a crypt.
Right.
So I'm like, I know there's some vampires and zombies, but I don't think I don't go through it and think I want a crypt where they have to find a vampire and release this person who's about to become a vampire. So let me make a dungeon about that. I totally do the reverse and get the big picture. Be like, all right, got a crypt. There's going to be zombies, there's going to be vampires and undead stuff. It's going to be dark. This is going to be the shape. Now let's figure out where it can all be.
Right.
And I will say this, I do make sure that I make some rooms only accessible if you succeed in challenges from other rooms.
Right.
But I don't make it so that you have to do everything in a certain order. So you can go all over the place. So somebody could go all the way to the end and be like, oh, there's a locked door. Oh, remember that room that had a chest that we didn't find out? I feel like I'm rambling now. But I do the reverse, is my point. I give myself the sandbox, and then I decide, what could I put in, what would fit inside this sandbox?
Right, yeah. Yeah. And I do kind of the same thing with sometimes, like if I draw a corridor and I build rooms in them, it's like, why would these rooms be closed? Why would they be locked? And then I think, oh, maybe these are private studies or something like that. You know, so I do a little bit of that too, where it's like, I don't know what this room is. Why would they have this room?
What about, what were you, sorry, you were talking about something.
You were talking about threat assessment in each room.
Yes.
I do something similar after I've determined what the dungeon is. You know, like the rooms and whatnot. And what I like to do with dungeons is I like to have a list of creatures that will be encountered in this dungeon.
Oh, okay.
So I like to have, like, okay, so this is a dungeon that has goblins in it. And the higher the risk, then there are going to be different kinds of goblins. Maybe hobgoblins. Maybe, like, there's an orc captain in one of these rooms. And then the lower ones, I would have just normal goblins. But the thought I have to make it exciting for me is I don't write how many goblins there are. I write 1d4 minus 1 goblins in this room. So every time someone walks into a room, I go, and there is 1 goblin in that room.
Yeah.
And if I roll a 1, then there's none.
Yeah.
But I don't know, and nobody knows.
Here's another thing I like to do in making dungeons. Especially if it's a one-shot, I set the easy, medium, hard, deadly. But I don't actually determine what's in those rooms until I know how many players I have and what level they are.
Right.
So I may say, as opposed to doing, like, rolling for it or saying there are 4 goblins, I may say, okay, now I know who's coming.
Right. Yeah,
I know there are 3 people coming, they're all going to be level 5.
Right.
Then I can say, okay, then it needs to be a challenge rating of this to be deadly, to be hard.
Right.
And then making it go from there.
Right. And
then you can work it with, you can play the game more than once using the same dungeon, the same map, and the same threats, but you just raise the challenge rating for depending on the party that you're working with.
Right. And
next time you play it, there's 6 players.
This pirate ship, I know there's only going to be 2 players because those are the 2 that are in this campaign, and it's not really convenient for anyone else to join. Not because we want to exclude them, but because, you know, it's online talking over Skype or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
So, you know, having like a player with me would be difficult because then because I don't have a DM screen. I've got everything laid out on my desk, and I'm just going, okay, yep, looking at my computer, and if someone's sitting next to me, then that doesn't work. Yeah. So having a control over how many people are playing really helps with that kind of random generation of monsters.
So going beyond so we've got, like, say you're at the point where you know the story of your dungeon, you know the layout, and you know the encounters. The dungeon itself, like the experience of going through the dungeon, should make a story in and of itself. So how do you make a dungeon that makes a story? Well, I mean, I guess you sort of will only know the story once people start playing it.
Right.
But
what do I set up to make a story happen?
Yeah. So beyond just well, if there's a kitchen here, then there needs to be a garbage disposal here. How do you tie it together? What's your mental process in saying, all right, this all needs to tie together and not just be a series of randomly cool things that I want to do. I want a water elemental over here, and I want a trap over here, but like they have nothing to do with each other. How do you keep that from happening?
One thing that I like doing is making there be something that the party is looking for or watching out for. Like putting in like active patrols.
Yeah, we were talking about an overarching theme.
Yep.
Or an overarching goal.
Like the pirate ship that I'm designing, one of the things that the characters are going to be looking for is a little girl that has been kidnapped. So
spoilers.
Yep. Hopefully we rescue her before this goes up. But
it's an overarching goal, something to remind your players that, like, this is your end game.
Right.
It's not just to find everything, get all the treasure, and kill all the enemies. Like, no, this is the goal.
I've had dungeons that were steadily flooding,
Ooh.
And
that's interesting.
And so
a rising threat.
Right.
Must do it quickly.
Exactly. And the water had sharks in it. So
laser sharks.
Exactly.
Why stop there?
Jump those sharks. So
sharks. Laser sharks.
I played that one with Pete and John
Laser
Snyder.
Sharks.
No,
the rising shark waters.
Shark waters. And that was really fun.
Nice.
Of course, it was also the day that I discovered that I lost all of my dice.
It's okay. It's okay, man.
Yeah, we got new ones. Yeah.
There's more dice.
Somewhere out there's a brown bag with a ton of dice that are very special to me. Please return it.
And if you find my missing camera,
yeah,
probably with those dice. Have nothing to do with each other, but it's in the same, just vanishing into the ether.
Yeah. So anyway, the what I like to do to make a dungeon come alive is make something imperative that you have to achieve, or like your dungeon, the one in your first campaign.
Well, in that one was there had just been a dragon attack, and you went into these catacombs to hide, and the goal was to escape.
Yep.
That was the goal. You actually didn't have to do any exploration if needed.
Right.
Did we already mention that, or was that after we?
That was after the
okay.
thing timed out.
Yeah. So you had to get out of this dungeon. You had to get out of these catacombs alive.
Mm-hmm.
And so, of course, there were monsters, and it was dark and stuff. But the end goal was to get out.
Right.
Because you couldn't get out the way you came in.
Mm-hmm.
So you had to find an exit.
That reminds me of something. Something to avoid at all costs, if only for my sanity. Don't do the Indiana Jones thing of, it's impossible to find the entrance to this place. It's impossible. Oh, I have the secret thing. This is imperative. We found the secret entrance. We got there. We get in. The enemies are behind us. They lock us in. Oh, and there's a little way to get out that's right next to where we need to go. That you could have walked in and gotten to the same place. Basically, do you remember that at all?
Are you talking about Raiders of the Lost Ark?
Raiders of the Lost Ark. Okay.
He goes in. And
Nazis were looking all over for the Ark of the Covenant, right? Looking all over for it. They needed a special thing from Nepal. Indiana Jones got it. He used it on a stick. It showed them exactly where the entrance was. They started digging. They found the entrance. They got down in there. And then everything went to crap. And they got sealed in the tomb thing. And how did they get out? A back door that just happens to open up into a Nazi airfield.
Which the Nazis didn't... I guess I forget this part of the movie. The Nazis didn't know that door was there?
No.
But
it's like
this a bad thing?
Well, because the Nazis could have just walked in and...
But they didn't know it was there.
But it was right in the middle of their camp that they had to set up.
But they didn't know it was there.
But they didn't explore the ruins at all when they were looking so hard for
So
something.
are you saying that if there's a back door to your dungeon,
make it like...
not in an enemy base? I literally have no idea why this would be a problem.
Okay. Well, it just messes with me because, like...
The Nazis didn't explore because they're the stupid enemies who didn't... Hey, I was gonna be... I was gonna apologize for a second
Nazis.
for insulting Nazis.
Sorry, Nazis.
I'm not gonna do
You're
that.
idiots.
Screw you, Nazis. Nobody likes you.
And we didn't tell you to be Nazis.
All right, so that happened.
Yeah.
The Nazis didn't know about the other way to get into this place because they didn't explore.
Right.
So when Indiana Jones came out, they were like, "What? There's a door right here that we could have used to get in. Why is that a problem?"
Because they had been scouring the whole place for this artifact.
You think it was a story hole?
Right.
Okay.
If there's a way that you don't need a stick with a little thing from Nepal to find it, and they've been looking for months in this area.
But they were looking for that thing. They weren't looking for a secondary door. And they wouldn't even know where to start looking for that.
Right, but if there's a ruin in your base, you might as well check out the ruin.
But they don't know that it's there, Matt. It's a secret entrance.
Right, but
you're acting like they ignored a big door with a label on it. Why would they start like you? No, I mean obviously whoever would for whatever reason that dungeon is there. If there's a secret exit that could also be an entrance, it would have to be something that would be secret. It would have to be hidden.
Right.
So,
but usually they're more obvious than the secret way that you're supposed to find this treasure.
Okay, so what you're saying is that if your dungeon has a secret exit that could also be an entrance, make sure that the main entrance is the obvious one and the one that could be found.
Right.
Okay. Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because if your characters are very clever and find that secondary secret entrance that makes their job way easier, that's their reward, is that they get to that last room.
Right, exactly. And if you're okay with that, that's fine. But if you want to have like an epic battle, don't make there be a secret door that can be discovered near the, like, on the backside of the place that you're going into. You know, like all it takes is one person saying, okay, I did check for secret doors, 20, and
I
there's
was somebody out there. I just heard a voice. I was like,
you know, that part of some movies, it's like, I open up this door of this house and I'm out of the dungeon. Where
let me ask you this.
People
then.
have been doing door-to-door searches through this city for.
Okay, let me ask you this then. Star Wars.
Yep.
A New Hope.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have the same problem with the stormtroopers not looking for loose tiles in the Millennium Falcon?
No, because they just walked in. Yeah.
Well, why is it? Why do you not have a problem with them? Like, why didn't they look for smugglers' holes? Are they not aware that there are smugglers with holes?
That was preliminary search, and you don't like rip up floor things when you're afraid of people like putting guns around the next corner. You go through, search it, and it's like
I'm not sold on your logic.
They had to take scanners in to scan for life on the ship. It doesn't make much sense technologically, because usually they go, oh, there's no life forms. Whereas,
well, in Star Trek they do that.
Well, in the first 5 minutes of Star Wars, it's like, hold your fire, there's no life forms.
Oh.
So, if they
the first 5 minutes of Star Wars is very Star Trek. Set your blasters to stun. Like, you guys can do that?
Don't tell Roddenberry.
Okay, so we just got into a very specific debate about dungeons right there.
Yeah. So I'm not worried about like really well hidden exits. Like on The Hobbit, the way they got into Smaug's place was a specific secret door that they had to get into.
Right.
In a certain way.
Right.
That's fine to me. When it's a super obvious exit that nobody finds.
Okay, so in summary, you're saying if you're going to have a secret entrance, make sure it's actually secret.
Right. Really secret, especially if your main entrance is secret.
Okay, that I can get on board with.
You know, because if you have a much easier way to get to the big treasure, then you better as heck make it really hard to get in that way.
Yeah. And screw you, Nazis.
Indeed. Anyway, so that's a pet peeve of mine in movies.
Yeah, Nazis?
Yeah. Idiots.
Man, let's just make every episode about dissing Nazis.
Dissing Nazis and...
Anyways. Okay, so what...
Torturers.
Where did we got off track there?
We were just discussing like
dungeons,
dungeon design and me
exits.
being frustrated at Nazis.
Okay, so we need to do these earlier in the day.
Yes.
Okay, so we got dungeon. I think we actually might have covered everything, but let me just think. We got how do you think of ideas for dungeons? How do you how do you judge encounter difficulty? I just randomly determine it. You form a story and then form a dungeon that fits that story. I kind of like to have a dungeon and then figure out what the story of the dungeon is after the sandbox is there.
Yeah.
Two totally valid approaches. One, both being useful in certain scenarios.
Right.
anything else specifically about dungeon. You guys have any questions about creating dungeons?
Yeah, leave it in the comments. I would love to answer your questions on those because I might not have answers right now. And you asking the questions makes me think about it, and then
find an answer.
We'll find an answer for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, again, make sure your dungeons are just fun.
Yeah.
You know, if you know that it doesn't make much sense to have a secret door that's like actually really obvious, and then when you guys exit, people are like, "Oh yeah, we knew that was there all the time," and your group, for some dumb reason, would think that that is the best thing since sliced bread, then do it. We should probably end this. We're not really getting it.
No.
We're really
we're just going down into Skyrim world.
Yeah.
So
next episode, I think we should definitely answer some questions because
yeah.
when we talk, we just are like
we just go off.
So this was fun.
Yeah. I just evidently felt like we needed to argue about something.
Yeah, we'll do that. Like every third episode will be an argument.
Yeah. Matt versus Joe.
What should we argue about? Find something that you think we would disagree on.
Yeah.
I'm the machine. He's the creative.
Just realize we do value our friendship. Until next time, this is Hogwash.
Yeah, we do.
Over and out.
That's good.